Hi, everyone. Welcome again to a virtual ImageOut, and I'm glad you could join us. And I'm also glad that you watched our narrative centerpiece, The Obituary of Tunde Johnson. And we're here to discuss the film. But before that, I want to remind everyone that all our films are eligible for our audience award. So make sure you cast your votes. And you can only do that on the Eventive site. So if you watch the film on Roku or anywhere outside of Eventive, please come back to Eventive to do your vote. And also a reminder that this is streaming live on Facebook and on YouTube and on Eventive. So if you have any questions or comments for us, make sure to do that on Facebook, do a comment there. Or if you're doing it on YouTube, make sure you're signed in as a subscriber or with your own login. Otherwise, it won't register as a comment. So we're very glad that we have a special guest tonight. And I'd like you to help me welcome the director of The Obituary of Tunde Johnson, Ali LeRoi. Hi, Ali.
Hey, how's everybody?
Yeah, I mean, for people who don't know you, because this is your directorial film debut, right? Directorial
Yes.
feature film debut.
Yeah.
Ali is also the co-creator and producer of shows like Everybody Hates Chris and Are We There Yet? So he's not a newbie by any means.
No.
But anyway, but this is far different than anything that you've done before, it seems like. And after watching the film, there's so much to unpack. And, there's so many layers. So, and I want to start lightly and easily, and hopefully we
Okay.
can unpack more things as we go along.
Yeah.
I just want to start with how this film project started, because from what I understand, the script won a screenplay competition
Right.
for it's a relatively new competition, and they're trying to find new, strong, diverse voices from new filmmakers or
Right.
scriptwriters. And I believe this is the first one that won the script for Tunde, right?
Yes, it's the launch $1 million screenplay competition, which was started by the producers of this film, Jason Schumann and Zach Green. Um, and yeah, I mean, their goal was to, find young, talented, creatives, writers. They went out to, a ton of schools, had, I think, over 500 submissions. And the prize was for the winning script that we'd make the film for $1 million. At least $1 million. I was one of the judges in the in the competition, and ultimately that's how I came to direct Tunde. When we got to all of the finalists, there was a bunch of amazing work in there, but I was a huge advocate for this story. I just thought that it had a lot of I just thought it was special in a lot of ways. And yeah, Stanley wrote an amazing script, and that's the one ultimately that we settled on.
I was going to ask. I was actually going to ask you how you got involved with the project, because I didn't realize that you were part of the jury that selected the film, and
Yeah.
well, that's great, because it means that from the beginning you were involved in in its life as a film.
Yeah,
From
I
script.
didn't I didn't know that I would end up directing it. I mean, when we ultimately had our judging process, a lot of conversations, a lot of time spent, really trying to consider, which film should be made, and not just which film should be made, but also which one could be best done for the budget that we had. And I mean, we talked a lot about that process, and because I have a lot of, production experience behind me, I was able to, lend some insight into what it might take in order to bring the film to the screen. And after we got done, I went on my way. And it wasn't until maybe a month or so later that Jason and Zach called me and asked me would I consider directing it, and it was an absolute yes for me. I was really honored, and I couldn't have said yes quicker.
and considering it's your first feature film to direct, that's a big thing too, for you to decide that this is the film that I want to do first.
Yeah, well, I mean, it has everything in it that I care about. Minus jokes. I mean, my career has really been built on comedy, but just in the world and in the time that we're living in, I certainly have greater concerns than that. And every issue and every story doesn't necessarily benefit by being told through, a humorous lens. And for me as a director, as a writer, as a creative, um, it was exciting and a great experience to be able to explore some of my other interests, in terms of storytelling and character development and again, it was my first full-length feature, so that was exciting as well.
So, since you're involved from the very beginning, well, you know the original script. How much of that original script actually was in the film? Because I feel like you probably did a lot of collaboration with Stanley on the writing, having your experience and what you're looking for and how to shape the narrative so it
Right.
will be better told. Did you do any of that?
Well, according to Stanley, we were having a discussion about this yesterday. According to Stanley, 80% of his original idea is still in the script. Yeah, I mean,
It sounds like it's a little bit less, right?
well, before they had begun the rewriting process with Stanley, Zach, and Jason before approaching me to direct. So, he was already in the process of fine tuning it and, and shaping the story, et cetera. And when I came in, it really did become about how to visualize it and how to amplify some of the storytelling points so that so that it can have the proper impact. So, because it's a very tricky story to tell with the time loops, it's a very dense story, and the way Stanley approached the time loop aspect of it, it wasn't a traditional, sort of Groundhog Day approach to it. Like, this character doesn't have some goal that he knows he's trying to accomplish, and every time he goes back through this loop, he's trying to fix the mistakes that he's already aware of. That wasn't how this story was constructed. So, a lot of what I brought to the table was just, being able to dial back on some of, Stanley's really intellectual. He's an incredibly smart young man, and it's evident in his writing. Uh, but at the end of the day, it's a film and not a book.
Yeah.
So we had to find ways to really shape and pare down everything he wanted to say and leave room for the part of it that we needed to see.
Yeah.
And so that's how I was instrumental.
Yeah, because he was only 19 when he won that contest, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, he was 19 when he wrote the script and began the submission process. And then I think by the time all the judging and everything had been done, I think he was 21 maybe.
still,
Yeah.
um, a person like that young, really could need the guidance of someone like you with all the experience. So anyway, the film premiered in 2019 at the Toronto International Festival, and obviously the climate was very different then. And now, a year later, it's starting to get seen by more audiences as you participate in more festivals,
Right.
and I was just wondering, and now it's very different because there's much more visibility and awareness to police brutality, and people are talking about it. And it's always existed before. It's just not being out there in the open that people are talking about. So I guess I just want to find out, how do you feel about that your film right now is it's never been more timely. to be seen by people?
Well, my honest answer is it really saddens me. I don't want this film to be timely. I don't want it to be of the moment. I don't want it to strike the chord that is, at the center of, everything that's happening in our society right now. I wish this was not the case. I'd rather be writing comedies. But to that end, um, this this thing that's been happening, and you have to remember that Stanley is Nigerian, and so he came to America to go to school. And this is one of the things that he has said to me. He's like, when Stanley, the Nigerian, born and raised and educated in Africa for all of his high school and elementary school years, comes to America. Being in America is the first time that he's Black, right? Which is a substantive reduction for someone who is identified as African, right? So then on the television, he sees, incident after incident after incident of violence by the state against Black bodies, right? So that was occurring, in his run up to writing this. And, so all of his experience through 16 and 17 and 2018, this is what he's seeing, and it reaches this pinnacle in this year, because if there weren't a pandemic and George Floyd had still been murdered by that officer, Derek Chauvin, we might not have been able to pay as much attention to it, because we would have had all of the usual things available to do. We would have been going to work, kids would have been going to school, we would have been going to vacation. We would have been busy. And so we'd have had limited space available to take in another incident. We would have been upset, but we would not have been available to pour out into the streets en masse and protest this thing. Everybody was free. Everybody was sitting at home watching television. Everybody was on the internet. So this thing happened under a set of conditions that was the perfect storm for visibility. And so that was after Ahmaud Arbery had been shot by those other two men who were ostensibly vigilantes, right? And then we find out about Breonna Taylor. So it's incident after incident after incident. And then after that, we got Jacob Blake in Kenosha and Jonathan Price in Texas. It's like it doesn't stop happening. So it is sad that it is more relevant now than ever. But I do hope that the story and the way that we're approaching it, and that's just one of the issues in it. I mean, as much as police brutality is a it's a very important aspect, and probably the most salient aspect of a societal issue in this film, because of how we deal with it. I mean, it's violence, so that gets your attention. This is really a love story. This is a film about two young people trying to find their way forward in life and the challenges they face because of all of these obstacles. There's race issues, there's violence issues, there's sexuality issues, there's all of these things going on. And ultimately, it's really just a story about two young people trying to figure that out.
Just like I said earlier, there's so many layers to the film. And just to add to your earlier statement about how this was the perfect storm, it's also because people are frustrated. They're, because they've been cooped up. They have all these emotions built in. So, and this, all the things that were happening gave them an avenue to express their anger and the inequality and all that. Though suddenly they have something to react to. So I think that helped also.
Well, I'll put it to you like this. This is a thing that I wrote down earlier, and it's basically the coronavirus sent us all inside, and racism brought us back out.
Yeah. So just to and because of my just a follow up to my question earlier about the premiering in 2019 and now getting seen again here at 2020, a year later. Did you see a difference in perception, or do you see a difference in reaction from audiences when you first started and now that you're starting to show again with a different the different climate going on?
Uh, Actually, no. I mean, this film was emotional and provocative and I think very unique when we premiered, and I think it remains, that in this time, and really the change happened outside of the context that the film was being seen in. So perhaps people are more inclined to view it with an open mind or an open heart, or what has happened in society has reinforced the message and the story. But I don't think there's a big dramatic shift in the way that it has it has struck any individual. I just think that the context around it has changed. So it might seem like it's more timely, but it's not a huge substantive difference than where we were a year ago.
I just feel like I think the audiences are more educated now on what's really happening. They're more aware, and they might react to the film differently than before.
Well, and I say this, I challenge certain types of ideas. What happens to Black people, in a racist society, what happens to the LGBT community, in a society that's rife with a particular sort of division and bigotry. These things aren't new, and it's not difficult to understand them. Everyone absolutely 100% knows when they are not being nice to someone else. They know when they're doing it. They know what it looks like. They know what it feels like. So this is not a matter of education, right? It becomes a matter of deniability. At what point are you no longer able to, claim that you're moving through the world with blinders on, and we start hearing the things of, I don't see color, and it doesn't make any difference if you're green, white, or purple, all those sorts of things, and whatever happens in your bedroom doesn't matter to me, and all these things, these disclaimers that people use to kind of reduce their culpability in what's happening to other citizens, other humans, other people. So I'm not interested in hearing anyone's claim of ignorance or lack of awareness. These are things that are happening, and people are telling you that they're happening. And if you would just listen to them, which is not a difficult thing to do, then maybe we could make some headway, into addressing these problems. We had a president that said, you can grab a woman by the pussy because you're famous. And, now all of a sudden there's 7 million women, marching out in the streets. It's not like they didn't know that was happening. They knew, but somehow there's a tipping point of outrageousness. Somehow it seems or looks or feels like we can't ignore it anymore. It's not that we don't know it's there. It's that we can't ignore it. Like, it's going to reflect poorly on me if I pretend this thing is no longer occurring, right? That's part of the reason why a certain type of person is spilling out into the streets. And then other people who have had a level of awareness now are moved beyond complacency and feel a need to act. And for the Black people, for the LGBT community, we're going, what the hell took you guys so long? Like, what else did you need to know?
Totally agree. And here in Rochester, we also have our own movement going on because we had a case of a Black man uh, who died eventually because of how he was treated while in custody and his name is Daniel Prude. And this is my pitch to Zach. This is why I said it's very important to bring the film to Rochester, because it's happening here right now, and people are on the streets protesting peacefully, and it's just never time. It's never even more timely to bring a film to a city, and I'm glad that I was able to convince him, because right now the energy is there, and the anger is there, and people need a response to whatever's happening that they've never gotten before. So any opportunity that we can bring this to the fore and be able to discuss this is a good thing.
Yeah, I think it's important that people talk about it. But more importantly is that, we act, in our singular capacity as, citizens. So, some people like to believe that, the march doesn't make any difference, but it does. When, when tens of millions of people across the world begin to show up to protest these injustices, what it does is that there's an affirmation around the idea that we're not alone, that we're doing the right thing. And when there's such a show of force, it does lead every individual to believe, okay, all I did today was got up and got out of my house and went somewhere and showed up to say that I don't think something is right. And then you realize that legions of people did the same thing. And now suddenly you go, oh, wow, we have power. We have power. We have influence. We can make things different than they are. And so that's the thing that's important and amazing, is that people are all individually moved in such a way that they show up for each other, I think. I mean, that it's a compliment to us that our work is in the middle of this in a lot of ways, and maybe that's something that helps to fuel that response. And again, it's unfortunate that we keep having these incidents that say that films and stories like this are necessary.
It's almost like people were just waiting to be mobilized, and now that they're ready to be out on the streets.
Well, so the tricky thing is, and I don't want to be overtly political in this conversation, but that's the difficult thing about what I will call systemic discrimination. And I'm expanding it beyond the idea of just race, because when you say discrimination, now you're talking about racism, you're talking about sexism, you're talking about homophobia. These are all ways that systems of power, choose to diminish, individuals for who they are or what they believe or how they act. Things that have nothing to do with what they have to offer, society as, functioning citizens. So that idea of people feeling like they need to get up and move. Well, you have to, because the people who want to oppress you, the people who want to marginalize you, the people who want to reduce your humanity, that's a non-stop job for them. Like literally, they're at it all the time. And unfortunately for us, we get a sleep at the wheel occasionally, and then we hit a proverbial deer and go, oh shit, we got to do something. But yeah, those guys, they stay on the job. They never stop. So yeah, we can't wait to be mobilized. Like, it's unfortunate, but we really have to become, active and systemic in the same way that these people who choose to oppress and marginalize and murder and destroy us, we have to be active in the same way that they are, to counter, centuries of oppression. Centuries.
Yes. Yeah.
Centuries. They wrote it it's in the Constitution. That they select passages from the Bible and use that against you. There's all of these things that cisgender white men invented to oppress everybody else.
I could not agree with you more. I think we have a question that is related to what we're talking about right now.
Okay, I see the schedule we agree on how we might be able to reimagine policing. So this idea of reimagining policing in a community, um, the idea that I don't know if this opinion is unpopular or not. You don't necessarily need to reimagine policing because there are good police. There are functioning police departments that do good things on a regular basis. There are officers who are bona fide legitimate heroes, and you don't want I don't want to reduce officers and the system that they're working in. I don't want to reduce them the same way that they that system chooses to reduce us. However, I just believe that the bar at the bare minimum for policing has to be a lot higher, because at the end of the day, your job is you're going to have someone's life in your hands. Well, the only other job I know that is like that voluntarily is a doctor. You go at the end of the day, I'm going to have somebody's life in my hands, and they have to train for 8 years and get all kinds of degrees and diplomas and go through all sorts of practices and processes before they get a scalpel and go start cutting somebody's heart open. Right? So policing and they're compensated for it. Right? Doctors make a lot of money. Why? Because they have to keep people alive. And in a lot of ways, the incentives, the practices, the processes around reimagining policing have a lot to do with treating the job not like you can hand it off to a high school student, put a gun in his hand, and tell him to go out there and do some law and order. you know, it actually should be highly trained, incredibly stable, well balanced, well meaning, well intended individuals who understand the weight and the gravity of the necessity to take a human life if it comes to that. If we believed that, if we had that trust in that body, and when I'm saying the law and order body, if we had that trust, if there's some way to reestablish and begin to build that trust, then that's the reimagining, how we think about what policing is supposed to do and how it's supposed to work. But it's an involved conversation. It should not be, it's not just defund the police and pick it with a sign.
Yeah.
It's a lot more complex than that. And so I just think it deserves, I think it deserves a real hearing, but it does have huge problems that are embedded deep in the DNA of why the police exist in the first place.
And I'm sure we can talk about that for hours, and and we're not going to solve anything here. But I just want to pivot a little bit and go back to the movie, because young black men already carries this burden on their shoulders that uh, they are perceived as a threat just because of the color of their skin. So the moment they step out of their homes, uh, they're already putting their lives almost in danger, more than their non-POC counterparts. So I was just wondering, what is the significance or the importance of putting that narrative in a queer space like you did for this film?
Well, I mean, it already exists there, right? A lot of what this film is about is, intersectionality, that we cannot separate the young black man from being, someone who identifies as gay. We can't separate those two things. He is innately those two things, right? So if you kill him, you killed someone who was gay. You also killed someone who was black. You also killed someone who was young. You killed someone who, in the case of Tunde, his parents are Nigerian, so you killed someone who is, has another country, another nationality in their background. So the character of Tunde is othered in a number of ways. He's a young Black man in a predominantly white social setting. He identifies as gay in a space that's predominantly cisgender straight, and he also is identifying as African in a space that is predominantly American, right? So all of those are things for him that you can't necessarily see other than his Blackness from the outside. So yeah, it's important to, it's important to accept the whole human being and not try to separate out, because the violence that's visited upon him, has only to do with the short-sightedness and the implicit bias and and maybe even outright racism of the officers that he's encountering, right? But there's no behavior that he can have that will save him, right? That's the, this film speaks a lot to that sort of notion. Being and or acting straight is not going to save him. Being a friendly, kind-hearted, loving Black person is not going to save him. Having white friends is not going to save him. Having wealthy parents is not going to save him, right? So again, these ideas of intersectionality, it's important that we stop separating out what we think are the more and or less acceptable aspects of who a person is, and start dealing with each other's complete humanity, right? That's the thing that you have to do.
And and you covered what I was going to ask first, the importance of also adding the fact that he comes from an educated background, wealthy family, because at the end of the day, nothing mattered. All the people saw, all the police brutality triggered, the color of his skin was triggered.
Listen, policemen stopped Skip Gates going into his own house.
Yeah.
Right? That was what the beer garden summit. You remember the beer garden summit a few years ago?
No, actually, right? I don't.
Well, so there was a professor, William Skip Gates, and he's a guy he's a Black man, educated, author, has an incredibly stellar scholastic, public speaking appearance track record behind him. And he lives in a predominantly white neighborhood, and he was going into his own home, and white people called the police on him. And then the police show up at his home questioning him about what he's doing there. And it's like, well, what am I supposed to do? Right? I did all of the things right. I'm educated, I obey the law, I made some money, I live in a nice neighborhood, and all of that does not stop white people from calling the cops on me, going into my own house. So,
and the thing is, it happens more than we know and more than we care. I mean, these are just things that get publicized, but in reality, it happens a lot more.
Well, in the United States, up to the end of September, up to the end of August, so in the first 8 months of the year, there were around 160, 170 shootings of civilians by the police, and literally a Black person has been killed every week, and that's more than one. But a minimum of one Black person has been killed every week in the first 8 months of this year by the police. We know about 6 of those names, maybe 4.
Yeah.
So that's what we're dealing with.
So, it's with the film, with the time loop, the time loop aspect of it, and the character of Tunde getting killed multiple times in the film. And I don't know what the makeup of your production team is. Did you feel that having to witness that and having to shoot uh, a scene like traumatic, um, did it have any effect on the people that the people that were working on the set?
100%. Yes. I mean, the scenes, as we worked our way through them, they became increasingly difficult. Some were particularly emotional for the cast, for myself, and I mean, I know we talk a lot about the violence in this film, but you know, there was an incredible amount of emotion around the difficulty that the character Soren is having about, this heartbreaking decision to hide the way he identifies from his dad, right? Like I mean, literally, like Spencer Neville, who played Soren, we shot one of the sequences that happens towards the end of the film when Tunde is believing that
Yeah,
they're going to come out to Soren's dad together, and Soren abandons that idea, and he breaks down and he's crying when Tunde leaves, and like I felt badly because after one of those takes, I went over to Spencer to talk to him for a second, and I just didn't appreciate how far he had to go to reach the level of emotion that he put on the screen, and like he needed some time to come down from that, and it was not different from me. Like when we shot the sequence where Tunde is strangled outside of the mini mart, the way that we portrayed that was really difficult to watch, is very difficult to shoot. We did a few different takes, and then after that we needed to take a break because it was really emotional and really difficult. It was hard to watch. It was hard to film. It was difficult to perform. And, there's just a lot of trust and openness when you're in that circumstance on a set. And so everybody was incredibly supportive, to one another. And, we made space and gave each other time. And I think in a lot of ways we were there for each other. And I was really happy about that.
yes, I could imagine, like, for the actors, you need some time to decompress after having a very difficult scene, right? And
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and and also people that were around the shoot, because these people are doing such a great job that it would be difficult not to be affected by what they're doing. I mean, I have to commend Tunde. I forgot the name of the actor. Um,
Steven Silver.
yes, Stephen. The way that his gaze, the way he looks, it's just penetrating, and it's like it's he gets me every time. Those eyes
Well,
are just
he has Steven has an amazing quality. He's incredibly charismatic. I think, really gifted and talented as an actor. And that was one of the things that, won him the part, is just, he was able to connect, right? And he really brings you in and makes you feel along with him. It's just got a really tender spirit, but strong at the same time. So yeah, he just really turned in, I think, a really stellar performance. And even in terms of the way we shot the film, if you notice, it's not particularly busy, in terms of camera work, in terms of how we set the scenes. Because for me, what was incredibly important was that I really gave the actors the space to do the work they needed to do. Like they're the special effects, right? Like and so it's that, like we really just kind of cleared out as much space as possible. There are long takes. There are a lot of moments of silence. We stay with expressions because ultimately you need to care about these people, and that's why I approached you know shooting it the way that it was shot, and in helping the actors shape their performances. It was really about letting the material breathe and giving them an opportunity, and I think the audience an opportunity as well, to make this connection. You should care.
And to your credit, that really worked because, you know, it just grabs you as an audience. It grabs you to what you're seeing on screen because of the way you shot the scenes. And, you know, everything that's superficial, that's not needed in a scene, are not there to distract you, because now you're focused to the emotions that these people are feeling and going through, and you're
Yeah,
pulled into that.
it's a very quiet movie, except for these big explosive, instances of violence. But other than that, it's a very quiet, thoughtful, introspective film.
But
I like that about it.
but even when you don't see the violence, and if
Yeah,
it's just suggested, it still makes your hair, you know, stand up if you just hear the sound of what's going on,
yeah,
even if you don't see it. A colleague of mine said she got nervous every time she sees the red and blue lights flashing, and that's
yeah.
all. That's it would just trigger that emotion out of her.
Well, that happens to Black people every time they're driving down the street and the officer
Yeah,
pulls up behind them. You get
yeah,
nervous.
exactly. And when you get nervous, you don't act normal, and then they just take it as the police would take it as something that you're planning something, or you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why, you know, you said earlier, training really comes in. You know, you can't just make judgment like that. And anyway, I don't want to go back to that part. Now, going back to how you shot the film, was there any? This was a question by a friend who emailed me. If I could ask you this, was there a version of a day that you thought you'd do and then scrap, you know, a version of the day in the life of Tunde, which ends up with the police brutality? Was there a version of that that you thought would be good, but ended up cutting or not even doing? Or
No,
yeah, whatever we saw
no.
is what you thought.
Yeah, every instance that Stanley put in the script. I mean, we shaped what it would look like, but we didn't take any of the instances of violence out, because if you take out one of those instances, then it literally takes out an entire sequence, because when he wakes up to the time that he's killed again, and I think in the film there may be five maybe six loops that we start, and there's a very subtle suggestion towards the end of the film, and I don't necessarily know that people understand what's happening when they see it. But when Soren and Tunde are standing outside at the party and they're having this really emotional exchange about going inside and coming out to Soren's dad, every time there's a cut in that sequence, it's another day. So the idea is that we don't know what it looked like the other times that he gets killed. But in that sequence, what you can see is that he's becoming, increasingly distraught and emotional. And the reason is because when he comes to that moment of being so close to getting inside the house to come out to the dad, the notion is something happens in between that conversation and the door, and he gets killed again. Right. So it's like it's a creative leap. But for us, it was really about this idea of trying to find ways to suggest that there were things that were happening that you could reasonably kind of conclude without necessarily seeing them. Right. That's why the sequences all play out differently as well. Because when Tunde wakes up in the morning, if he does one thing different, it changes the trajectory of the entire day. Right. If he takes the drugs, it goes one way. If he doesn't take the drugs, it goes another way. You know, if he talks to Marley, it goes one way. If he doesn't talk to her, it goes another way. So that's the fascinating way and the approach that we took to the time loops.
I when I first read about the time loop, I thought, how are they going to do that? It's just going to be repeating over and over again. And so when I first saw, the first day was very jarring how it ended. Like, whoa. And then so where is this going to go? Because I know it's a time loop. And then it happens again. It's like, oh, okay. So that's what they're doing. We get to know more about the person, and there's different aspects. I thought they're just going to repeat the whole day the same way, and
Right.
so well, I'm glad that it was. I was texting someone when I was watching it because I watched it at Outfest, and I was like, okay, this is more interesting than I thought.
Okay. Well, credit Stanley again. Stanley did an amazing job with this script, and I just can't even, I don't have enough praise to heap on him for the work that he did. He was just really incredible.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's another question that I saw, but I couldn't put it on the screen real quickly because I couldn't watch the comments. But someone was wondering, as a filmmaker, do you have any thoughts on the resurgence of the Black horror genre? Okay, there it is. It's on the screen right now.
This is also a time when the genre of Black horror in film and TV is experiencing a resurgence with racism. Would you put this film into that genre? Do you have a sense of why this film? Okay, is would I consider this, part of this Black horror genre? Not necessarily, because I think it fits more in something of a different sort of sci-fi space, right? Horror in some ways, take Lovecraft Country, for instance, is science fiction, in a lot of ways, but it's also horror, and Get Out is a psychological thriller, and has aspects of horror, and this is, it's partly sci-fi because of the time loop, but the genre is more a tragic romance, right? So what I think these films have in common is that Black artists, Black creatives are now having the opportunity to tell stories in other genre spaces, right? So my good friend Reggie Hudlin always says, Black is not a genre, right? There's horror, there's romance, there's comedy, there's sci-fi, there's thrillers, right? And so a lot of times Black storytellers have been, placed into, all right, well, you can do a love story, but it's got to have all Black people in it, or you can do a comedy, it's going to have all Black people in it, and and occasionally there might be like a cop drama or like some kind of hip hop movie, right? But these other, more expansive genres, superheroes and sci-fi and psychological thrillers and that sort of thing were not spaces where the Black perspective was being valued. And so I think that is what is changing now, is we're getting an opportunity to move into other very specific, very well understood genres of storytelling and populate it and inform it with the Black experience.
Another friend said something similar to what you just said. He said something like, "Oh, it's always been there. It's just now people don't care that they're being done by Black artists and that they star Black actors, and that once in a while they're talking about Black culture and focusing on Black lives, but it's not a separate genre. It's still just horror genre. It's just now people are noticing."
I've been watching white movies my whole life. I mean, look, in a nutshell, I've been watching white movies my whole life. And the fact that there was all white people in it did not prevent me from understanding what the story is or what the characters were confronting and what their challenges were, because I had experiences that, allowed me to understand that. I've seen films from, from Germany and, various parts of the East, Chinese movies and Japanese movies and Korean movies, so yeah, it's just like, it's all storytelling. And unfortunately, I will say, because of systemic racism, uh, whiteness is suggested as this somehow catch-all norm. Like, we can understand a love story because it has two white people in it. But if we took those white people out and then put any other two people in there, somehow now suddenly it doesn't make sense. And that's not true at all. The end.
Well, it's the same argument that I tell my friends about LGBTQ films. It's like all these stories are the same. You're just replacing the characters with LGBTQ characters. So, but it's still, the narrative is still the same. It's still a love story, or it's still an action movie. And it's like, but people have, and even with gay people who only watch gay films and would not watch a lesbian film, or lesbians who won't watch a gay film, it's like, when you watch a mainstream film, you don't care if the protagonist is male or female. So why would you care if it's gay or lesbian?
Well, I I understand the there's a defensiveness, and I'm not saying that in a pejorative way. Uh, as an audience, um, it feels nice to see yourself. As an audience, it feels good to know that the specifics of your experience are, valued and validated and appreciated and represented, you know, at the highest levels of creativity. That feels good. It's incredibly affirming. And so the posture that all right. Oh, you're dead back. We dropped out for a second. Yeah. So it's like, and if you're a gay male, if you're a gay white male, then I guess you can see Call Me by My Name. But if you're gay black male, then you go fuck that movie, right? So like, right, you're limited in your choices if all you seek are things that look like you. But if you're a cisgender white male, you really haven't had there's been no need for you to make that choice because everything is about you. So you don't, understand why everybody else is so upset. It's like, yeah, dude, you got all the movies. We just want a few. Can we have five? So, I don't think that necessarily it's the greatest attitude to have about how you as an individual interact with, you know, whatever it is you want to be entertained by, whether it's, a film or a book or, I don't know. I guess if you're a lesbian, you can only go see WNBA games or whatever, I don't, like that. Like if only I can be represented in the thing that's going to limit my choices. Uh, but I don't want to be responsible for that. I want to create work that speaks to me and people who think like me and people who have the experiences that I have. And I also want to be free to, explore and experience these things that I don't know about. Um, yeah, but it's just difficult when again you're always feeling, disenfranchised, marginalized, reduced, diminished. Uh, you know, you know, uh, the last month I've not wanted to watch any movies with white people in them because I'm like, yeah, it's like I don't feel like it right now. I just don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we have another question here. It seemed like Tunde's Nigerian heritage connecting with the power of his ancestors was part of what got him through. Can the director talk about that?
Well, I mean, there's certainly, certain heightened spiritual, suggestions in this film that come from, Tunde's African heritage, and his father speaks on that, briefly in the context of the film. So, did it get him through that? In a manner of speaking, I would say it certainly helped him because his heritage, his history, his connection to family, his identity as he is aware of it, are all things that help him see himself as whole, right? And so because ultimately he's able to see himself as a whole person, um, that is the thing that makes him understand that Soren's love is not going to save him, right? It's something that has to be innate. He needs to care enough about himself to remove himself from a toxic relationship because that's the thing that's killing him, right? That's the metaphor. Yeah, in truth, inside of this film, Tunde is never killed by the police. It's this horrible nightmare he's having that's coming from this relationship that he's in that is killing him. He's taking drugs, he can't sleep, he's having all of these, these crazy experiences, and it's manifesting itself in something that feels otherworldly. But the truth of the matter is yeah, none of that happened. Tunde is fine at the end of the film, you know, but he needs to understand for himself that, how they say you're enough. Like he recognizes that being himself is enough, and he doesn't need that validated by Soren or anybody else. That doesn't make him safe, but at least it makes him available to love and to live in a way that hopefully is more fulfilling than what he's been going through.
Did we get you back? Okay, I think we got you back. We're going close to an hour here, but I don't want to waste too much of your time. But I do have one more question. If you were making this film a year later, because you made this, 2018, early 2019,
yeah,
would you do something different? Would there be artistic choices that you would have gone another way now that we're in this a different situation?
I mean, even if we were shooting later, given what Stanley's script was about, I would say no. Because this film was not about the Black Lives Matter movement. It wasn't, in this singular way about the violence that Black people have encountered at the hands of police. That was a device that we used, that Stanley created in the storytelling to get to another idea. So there's a timelessness that this film has that I think, will help it to endure. That's what I like to believe. Um, if we had made it more of the moment, if we'd made it a year later, if we had shown protests in the streets or whatever those are, then it's just an entirely different movie, right? Now it's about something else. And this movie is, again, it's a love story. It's about feeling whole. It's about being complete. It's about being able to live a life that, is a good one. And what do you need to know? What do you need to do? What sorts of choices do you need to make in order to give yourself the best chance at doing that? That's what this film is about.
It's about freeing yourself from a toxic relationship, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And like I said, there's so many layers to this movie, and I invite if you're watching and you haven't seen the movie, go check it out. And if you've seen it, make sure you go back to Eventive and vote, because, like I said, this film is eligible for Audience Awards. And thanks again, Ali, for joining us and spending some time with us, because I think this is one of the films in the festival that really needs just that space to talk about it for a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you guys having me, and I'm happy to have taken the time.
Yeah. Thanks again. And I hope more people will get to see the film, whether it be being in other festivals, which I forgot that I was going to add earlier when we were talking about genre. I'm surprised to see the film in a lot of genre festivals. It's popping up in genre festivals, and some people were asking me, "Is that a horror movie?" I'm thinking, well, it's probably there because of the time loop aspect of it. So it's kind of like
Right.
sci-fi. That's
Yeah.
that's the only thing I could think of. But you know,
Whatever you need to tell yourself in order to watch this movie, tell
yeah,
yourself that, then watch
yeah.
the movie.
I was gonna say whatever it needs to be seen by people.
Yeah.
You know, let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, good luck with the film, and I hope
Appreciate it.
it gets the attention that it needs. I hope it finds the audience that needs to see it, and
Yeah, I'm sure it will.
yeah, and good luck to your next projects.
Thank you all. I appreciate you.
Okay, have a good
All right.
night. Bye
Take care.
bye.
Good night. Bye.